Hi, my name's Kevin. I'm here with Muse Kinetics, formerly known as Keith McMillan Instruments, and I'm here to give you a quick start guide on the new Kboard C editor. The Kboard editor will be needed to do things such as assigning MPE, enabling MPE, changing your sensitivities, and updating their firmware, so we'll go over some of that in this video. When you first launch the editor, you'll get this message asking if you want to send the current settings. Even if you choose no, it will do that as soon as you make any changes from the software. Those changes will apply to your hardware immediately, and sustain will light up in red. If it's connected, it will show connected at the bottom. Otherwise, it will say disconnected. This editor is compatible with both Keith McMillan keyboards or the new Muse Kinetic branded keyboards. Mine's already been updated, but I'll update it again so we can see the procedure. Up here at the top, under the hardware tab, you can update your firmware here, or you can also opt to go into the settings. Here you can see the current firmware loaded on your device and the available firmware online. And if there's a mismatch and you see a new version, then you can choose to do the update there. To avoid any issues, it might be worth running straight into a USB port and avoiding any hubs. So I'll click the update firmware, and the first thing you're going to see is the sustain go solid red. Following that, it's going to flash, and then the white keys are going to light up from left to right. Now the update is complete, and we can take a look at some of the settings. Let's take a look at the bottom three sliders we have for sensitivity. You have a slider for velocity, pressure, and tilt. And I'll also mention, when testing this out, you probably want to have an instrument that responds to velocity. And also make sure that they're enabled, the feature that you're testing. When they're illuminated, velocity, pressure, and tilt will be active. I'll start with velocity and demonstrate some of the things you might want to be careful of. Like for instance, if I set it too high, you can see that there might be a note that's extra sensitive. I can trigger this one note by just putting a bit of pressure on the case there. If it's too low, you might not register the full amount. You might not be using the full resolution of the MIDI spec. So to demonstrate this, I have this free utility for Mac OS called MIDI View. You can see with the sensitivity set all the way to 0, I'm not registering the highest value possible for velocity, which should be 127. So at very minimum, I want my velocity to represent, or any of these ranges, to hit 127. One of the things you might encounter, as I showed earlier with my stuck note, it seems the velocity turned down is helping that out. But I'd imagine even if I take a look here at the on threshold, that's the amount of force necessary to trigger a note. You can experiment with that at lower values, but for me, if I go down too low, you can see that the key has the chance of misfiring or triggering on its own. I want to use the on threshold to mitigate that. I'm not getting any missed triggers. Still requires a really minimal amount of force to register a note. Over here in the preferences section, there's velocity curves that you can dial in. You can start with linear. That's going to represent kind of an even line from quieter to louder velocities. If you wanted to appropriate having kind of a softer hand or a softer touch in your playing style, I would recommend to try out exponential, because that's going to require more force to get into the higher velocities. And vice versa. Switching to logarithmic is going to ramp up higher in the velocities, giving you the feeling of having a heavier hand or a heavier play style. Let's take a look at some of the information we can send from tilt and pressure. Don't forget to enable the features you want to test or use. When MPE is not enabled, you can change and transmit different MIDI CCs by pulling up and down on the pressure CC and the tilt CC input boxes right here. Or you can also double click and enter your value. Pitch bends at the very bottom, and then you have all the different standard CCs available. So we'll start with tilt. And I'll just demonstrate, even with electric, the instrument I'm using, if you click on the global tab, there's settings for pitch bend and per note pitch bend. So we can play around with those settings there. It looks like I have one semitone for each. And if I enable it there, if I want to take a look at that data, I could use an application like MIDI View that I showed earlier. But now I'll take a look at some of the different devices in Ableton, such as MIDI Monitor. This is pretty handy because I can see velocity, and over in flow I can see the pitch bend or the per note pitch bend. There we go. I think I might have it limited in the editor there, so I'm going to move it to 12. And you can see the full range there. This is pretty handy with plugins or even mapping and using even with MIDI hardware. So I have Repro 5 here, and I have CC7, the standard CC for volume, mapped to the output, and to the cutoff I have the standard CC74 brightness. If I wanted to, even without MPE, I could use tilt and try something to control the volume of a sound. Or I could try it to the cutoff as well, so we'll try CC74. This isn't polyphonic right now. It is monophonic, MPE isn't enabled, but it works great to control monophonic devices. And even if you have polyphonic devices, kind of have a look at how the data is managed in MPE. It's interesting, you can see a full range, 0 to 127 on the cutoff. If you bring in another key, you'll see that cut in half to 50% per key. And it's probably a great time for me to demonstrate some of the other features that you have in this side of the editor, which is the pressure disabled and the tilt disabled return value. Those give you the option of returning the CC or the values to a certain number when you disengage tilt or pressure. So I think I'll demonstrate with tilt, which is currently setting the brightness. If I was to disable tilt right now with at a low setting, you would hear the brightness come back to a value of 127. I'll do that so we can see it, the value on the knob. But if I wanted a different behavior, I could turn it off, which is right below 0. This way I could set the tilt to a certain value. Let's try to get it at 50% and leave it there. Let's brighten it to a higher value and leave it there. Also in this section of the editor, I'll mention that you have a MIDI Through option, and that'll be very necessary if you're on Windows. If you want to test this with a DAW the way I'm doing in real time, you can use the MIDI Through option to route the MIDI through the editor. You probably want to get a MIDI loopback device such as Loopy. From the editor, I can enable MPE right here and set how many member channels I want in my rotation. The way that's going to work is channel 1 is going to be the global information for your standard pitch bend, and all the other notes will occupy channels in a rotation. So because we picked 8, we have 9 channels used in total. I've pulled up MPE control as well, and that's very handy to view the information. So if I was to enable, say, tilt to CC74, I would look at that through slide. And if I switched it over to pitch bend, I would see that in note PB or note pitch bend. And finally, we have press here for pressure. We'll take a look at that with an instrument. Let's try drift, for instance, and I'll start with setting the MPE to CC74, and we'll test that out there. Each instrument's going to be different, but drift has little pull-down menus where you can pick the values you want and just look for slide, which represents tilt. So let's try this on the filter. We'll do 80% and I'll lower this value. Looks like slide is already being affected right here to the oscillator shape, so I'll remove that. Just make sure there's no other instances, and we'll try it just on the filter. As you can see, it's an option in all the different modulation checkboxes, or all the different modulation pull-down boxes. I'll put that one back to envelope, and we'll try it on the shape here, starting with like 20%. So it sounds like there's some hard sync. So I hope this video serves to help you get to know the keyboard and the keyboard editor, setting up your MPE and settings. Please visit our new website at musekinetics.com, and I'll see you on the next video. Cheers.